Dance music.
I saw an ad on Craigslist for an 18.5-inch planer for $500, so I went to check it out. When I get there, the guy opens his garage to the planer, a 2-horsepower dust collector, and a shop air filter. All of it, $500 with all documentation. I bought it. I found out later that the shipping weight of the planer was 491 pounds. I can only imagine in this configuration it was about 400.
Here we go again.
So yeah, what do you think about that, huh? The planer itself is a Woodmaster 718, made in the USA, and it converts to a molder, a drum sander, and a gang rip saw. New, today, they sell for about $3,000, and it came with all of the accessories. My dad was over because he's been working on the siding on our house, so he gave me a hand getting the planer into the basement. When you live in the country, you need a tractor. And when you have a tractor, you find uses for it. I'm so glad we have a tractor. The planer has 2 motors, the cutter head, which is run by a 5-horsepower Leeson motor, and then the feed motor. The cutter head needs 220-volt power and calls for a double-pole 30-amp breaker on 10-gauge wire. The feed motor runs on 110, so I wired that in 12-gauge and put everything in one dedicated box. Anytime you're working in your electrical panel, it can be very dangerous. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. I'm not qualified to give lessons, I'm not licensed, so I'm not going to do it. There's lots of resources out there, but seriously, if you don't know what you're doing, stop. Since this configuration of 110 and 220 volt in the same box was fairly unique, I needed custom faceplates. The bench grinder worked pretty well for that. Most tools with cast iron tables accumulate some surface rust on them with time. There are a lot of ways to tackle the job, but I'm using what I have on hand, some WD-40 and 400 grit wet dry sandpaper. The goal here isn't to get a mirror finish, but to make sure there's no friction. Top it off with a little paste wax to protect it. When I unboxed the accessories, I found the sanding drum with a variety of grits, the in and out feed tables, extra belts, some dust collection fittings, 2 gang rip blades, the molder heads with a whole box of brand new molding knives, still coated in oil, and 2 sets of freshly sharpened planer knives. I installed and cleaned the in and out feed tables, then turned my attention to the innards of the machine. I replaced the feed rollers and set their spring pressure to factory specs. Then it was onto the planer knives. The ones in the machine were pretty chewed up. The planer also came with a knife setting gauge to ensure proper setup, which was pretty handy.
We go again. Here we go again.
Then it was time for a test run. There's some minimal snipe on the front of the board, but I should be able to adjust the feed roller spring to fix that. After a little trial and error, I found the sweet spot for this piece of scrap cherry. After I patched it through the machine a few times, I can mount the thickness gauge with confidence. Here's the plain side, and here's the unplaned side. In June of 1992, some guy paid $2,200 for this machine. I bought it for $500 23 years later. I sold the dust collector for $120 and I'm keeping the air filter. This was an awesome find.